Hi, I'm Jamie Smart, and in this episode, I'm going to be unpacking a coaching session I did with a very successful coach called Pam Featherstone, that you may have heard on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Just before I go through that, a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, the Thriving Coaches Blueprint program, which I run a couple of times a year, it's going to be kicking off in August. And it's a good fit for you if you are already doing one-to-one work with people and you want to take your practice to a new level, have a bigger impact, and move to a kind of coaching package model. So if that's you, you may want to go to jamiesmart.com/thriving to find out more about the program. And the other thing is that this podcast is sponsored by the Clarity Coach Training Program, which kicks off in September. And the September intake is the last one we're going to be doing until 2020 at the earliest. Basically, I'm clearing some space next year to do some stuff around product development and other stuff like that. So we've booked, I think, the first 25 or 26 places. There's 64 in total. So if you want to be one of the 32 people in room and 32 people live streaming who are joining me for the 2018-19 Clarity Coach Training Program, go to jamiesmart.com/coach. Now here's the episode. So, as you may know, I did a coaching session with a very successful coach called Pam Featherstone in the first module of the 2017-18 Clarity Coach Training Program. And it was all around weight loss and self-care. Basically, Pam, super successful. She's like a £1 million coach. She's very, very focused and committed in her work and delivers great results and really supports her clients. And when it came to taking care of herself, taking care of her health, going to the gym, that sort of thing, she struggled with it. So that's what she asked me to work on. So I did a coaching demo at the front of the room, which is something I often do, and then I unpacked it for the group. And so I thought I'd unpack the session here for you on the podcast. So I'm just going to take you through it. So just before I do, my overall model that I'm working to, this is how I orient myself and work in a session. It's very, very simple. It's calibration, connection, and education. So calibration is just finding out where the other person is, finding out where you are, finding out how they see the world, how they're making sense of the world, and watching and listening and feeling moment to moment to moment, to make sense of what's going on and find my way forward with the client. And as you may already know, this is very kind of, you could say, intuitive work, but it's an intuition that has been cultivated, you could say, through exposure to an understanding of the principles behind clarity. So that looks to me like the ultimate leverage point for your impact as a coach, but it's also what I'm sharing with Pam. The thing that had the impact for her is waking up to these principles within herself. And as you'll hear at the end of the session, the other thing is, after I've finished unpacking it, I'm gonna play you a very brief recording from the second module of the Clarity Coach Training. So it's one thing to do a coach demo in front of the room and someone finishes feeling good and saying nice things. It's quite another thing to follow up with them 6 weeks later, and in fact a year later, and see what's changed. So you'll hear at the end of this session, you'll hear a bit of interview footage with Pam from, I think it's 6 or 7 weeks later. So anyway, on with the session. So it starts by me just, getting with Pam at the front of the room and then asking, what would you like to have happen from the coaching session? What would you like coaching on? So that's just me starting the process of calibration and setting a direction for the coaching, because I want to make sure that she and I are on the same page about what she actually wants coaching on. So straight out of the gate, Pam says, well, I'm really successful in my business, and when I set business goals, I always achieve them. But when it comes to me personally, I don't achieve the goals I set myself. And whenever I'm doing anything like I want to get healthy and lose weight, I feel guilty. So I listen to that. And, she's saying she can achieve goals in a business context, but not in a personal context. And I notice that there's kind of a split there, that she's got business and personal as two separate worlds. But, I look at Pam and she's a single human being. She's a person. And so she's not actually split in two, but that's how it's represented to her in her mind. The other thing is when she talks about feeling really guilty, giving herself time for herself, my kind of thought, feeling, confusion alarm goes off. It's like, oh, she doesn't understand what her feelings are telling her about, where her feelings are coming from, all that sort of thing. So I kind of bookmark that for later. So this is all calibration, just from the first thing out of Pam's mouth. The other thing is at the end of her kind of opening statement about what she wants, she says, when it comes to me, I feel really guilty about it, and I feel like I set myself up for disaster all the time personally. Now here's the thing. Chernobyl was a disaster. Mudslides and forest fires that wipe out hundreds of homes, those are disasters. Missing a personal goal, that's not a disaster. But that, again, that's how how Pam's representing it to herself. So I want to find out what she means by disaster. So that's my first question. After she's given her kind of opening thing, I say, what do you mean by disaster? Because I want to find out, because all too often, we use language and we think we know what the other person means. But as you'll hear again and again and again through this, I know that I don't know what she means. So I'm looking to calibrate. I'm looking to find out what she means by what she says. So I say, what do you mean by disaster? And Pam says, like not achieving what I set out to achieve. Well, now here's the thing. We'll all have times when we set out to achieve something and we achieve something else, or we don't get the result that we expected, or whatever. So framing that as a disaster, I'm like, I'm not sure if that's going to be great, but I just kind of bookmark it. So now I know what she means by it. So I then play some stuff back for her, and I'll often do this with clients. I'll just play back what I'm hearing so far to make sure I'm on the same page with her. So again, calibration. So I say, I'm just going to play some stuff back to you. I heard you say, I always achieve my business goals, but I don't achieve the goals I set for myself personally. But I was confused because the goals you set for yourself in your business, are they not for you personally? And she said, yeah, but they're also for my clients. So I was just trying to find out kind of where the line between the two are, business and personal. But I was also seeing if I could prod a little bit to see if Pam can see in there that actually, one human being, and the things she does for herself are also going to benefit her clients, and vice versa. So I say that to her. So if you do your business effectively, then your clients benefit. I'm checking my understanding of what she's saying. And she says, yeah, and I do too. And I say, okay, but wouldn't your clients benefit from you being healthier? And she's like, yeah, massively. And this is one of the battles I have in my head, because I tell myself logically that it's the right thing to do to put my oxygen mask on first. So she confirms that it's the case. But she says that it's a case of basically telling herself one thing, but feeling another. Sort of like saying, I get that intellectually, but it's not actually playing out in my life. So she says there's like a massive gap between what I logically tell myself and what I actually feel inside. Well, this is not unusual. We all have areas where we know we should be doing something, or it makes sense or whatever, but it's not actually showing up for us. And so at this point, I start to talk to her about the universal nature of this. So I say, well, now I heard you say, and I think that's for all of us. Like if I could just go to the doctor and say, hey doc, and he says, hey Jamie, you need to lose a couple of stone, you need to exercise every day, stop smoking, stop eating biscuits, etc. And I just went, okay, great, thanks for the information. And I went and did it. That would be really easy. But that's not really how it works. And I generalize this point. I say that Everyone faces this. Everyone has things that they think they should be doing, but they don't do it. So part of why I'm doing this is one of the things, when people go outside in, when people believe their feeling is coming from somewhere other than thought, which is what Pam signaled in the very first sentence, that her guilty feelings and all that stuff. When people are believing that their feelings are coming from somewhere other than thought, they feel kind of separated, kind of isolated. And so it often occurs to me to just start pointing people back in the direction of the fact that, we're not alone. We're all in this together. And part of why I'm wanting to do that, remember I said the model is kind of calibration, connection, education. Well, I'm wanting to head into a feeling of connection with my client. If you're my client, I'm wanting you and me to feel really connected, really close. Because what I've found is that, how it looks to me is that, your job as a coach is to help create the conditions for your client to have the insights and realizations that are going to help them out. And I found that, the feeling of connection, the felt sense of connection to another person, connection to who you really are, connection to life itself, that's the primary that's like really good conditions for making it easy for someone to have an insight. So that's the general direction I'm pointing. The general direction I'm wanting to head in with my client is I'm going to want to head into an insight-friendly space. I'm going to want to head into that feeling of connection and quiet where the person starts to get a felt sense of who they really are. And as you'll hear towards the end of the session, that's where we get to. So early in the session, I'm just kind of noticing and checking what I'm hearing. So really trying to get on the same page with her, asking questions, trying to understand her world, but also kind of pointing to the fact that these are universals, that, that she's not alone, that everyone does this. Like, all the interesting thing is the struggles that people have, the challenges that people have, the things that they feel so private about and so vulnerable and like it's only them. Those are actually almost always universals. So it's almost like, oh, everyone feels that way. And often people will tell me that just hearing that what's going on for them is normal. What's going on for them is something that everyone experiences in some way. That kind of often has people, feel a little less alone, a little less isolated, a little less hopeless. So I universalize it, and I kind of point to the fact that this is at the heart of the matter. But then what I say to Pam is I said, so why do you think it is that a person would have something that kind of makes sense intellectually, kind of makes sense on paper, but they don't seem to be able to get themselves to do it? So again, this is back to calibration. Why is that? I ask her why people have these. And she said, well, part of it is I feel really guilty about spending time on myself. So she'd flagged that in her initial statement. Now she goes into it in detail. And I say, well, it's funny you say guilty. I was going to come back to that. And then I gather a little more information. I ask her, are you feeling guilty beforehand, during going to the gym, or afterwards? Are you feeling guilty at the thought of it, or are you feeling guilty while you're doing it, or after, before, during, or after? So again, this is me just finding out how it works for her. So she says, it's during. I'm like, okay, great, now I know. So I say, I then check my understanding. So I go, you might go, okay, I'm going to take time for myself, but while you're taking time for yourself, it actually feels uncomfortable. Is that fair to say? And she says, yeah, I start to feel more stressed, and it's harder to have the right level of commitment to it. Now, this word commitment, I kind of bookmark that as well, because I know that, Pam's already, as a coach, generated, a lot of client relationships and a lot of money and had a lot of impact on people. And my guess is the way she uses this word commitment is that commitment is really important to her and is one of the things that's really worked for her in her business. So I'm there's an old saying that if you want to see what limits someone, don't look at what works badly for them. They'll happily give that up. If you want to see what limits someone, look at the things that work really well for them. My guess is commitment, the idea of commitment, is one of the things that's worked really well for Pam, but it's not working in this area of her life. So she says, yeah, I start to feel more stressed, and then it's harder to have the right level of commitment to it. And so I remember my question to her was, why would someone have something that makes sense on paper, makes sense intellectually, but have difficulty getting themselves to do it? And she said, well, I feel guilty spending time on myself. And then she explains it. So I say, well, what do you make of that? Now, this question, this is a question I often ask, this kind of question anyway, which is trying to find out, trying to get people to reflect on, how come? Like, why is it like this? What's going on? Why would it be that feelings of guilt and stress seem to make it harder for her to have, quote unquote, the right level of commitment? So I ask her that again. I say, why do you suppose a person who's doing stuff that they know is going to basically benefit everyone because it's taking care of themselves and making them, putting their oxygen mask on first so they can be of service and that sort of thing, so basically describing her situation, why would they feel guilty doing that? I ask her for her understanding of it. She says, I feel like I need to be working. So she doesn't really answer my question, but that's okay. She again gives me information about what's going on for her. She says she feels like she needs to be working. And again, my thought, feeling, confusion alarm is going off. Now, you need to understand, when I'm working with a client, there are two things I know for sure, two constants. One is who they really are. I know that their true self is the source of resilience, peace, beauty, love, creativity, resilience, health, all these things, that comes from who they really are. And the other thing I know for sure is the 100% nature of the thought-feeling connection. And so when people start talking about feelings of guilt, feelings about this, feelings about that, I feel like I need to be working, she said, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? So then I check, Pam, that feeling of I should be working or I need to be working, that feeling of guilt, what do you believe that feeling is letting you know about? So I'm asking her kind of, where do you think your feelings are coming from? She says, I've got no idea. And so then I draw a picture of it and I offer her options. Now, I like drawing pictures sometimes with clients. So I just check. I draw one column, which is Pam's theory of guilty feelings. And I say, from what she said, I write, it's that her guilty feelings are coming from the work that's not getting done, putting herself first, and that's about it. And then I say, okay, and I'm wanting to get everything on the list, just kind of everything she might be feeling guilty about. So, and then I check again, I say, so get a guilty feeling, and it seems like it's giving you information about work that needs doing, about what you're being like, about you, what you're like, where you are in the pecking order of who gets taken care of. So again, I'm just playing back my understanding. One of the things, speaking to you as a coach, I'm always wanting to do my best to stay really close to my client's reality, because I know that if I'm staying close to their reality and really understanding them, that they're going to feel safe and comfortable and connected. So one of the things I should have mentioned, during this, I'm listening really, really deeply to my client. As strange as it may sound, I'm not really thinking about much. Like an intuition or an idea or a question or a story or something to do will pop into my mind. But I'm not thinking about, what are the tools in my toolbox, or what question should I ask, or what should I do? I mostly, this will sound weird, but I'm mostly kind of just chilling, waiting to know what to do next, okay? And really kind of hanging out in a good feeling with my client and listening as deeply as I possibly can and feeling for that sense of connection. So I'm regularly playing back what I've heard to make sure we're on the same page. And then I set out to explain that Pam's feelings don't relate to what she thinks she does, that they relate to the perceptual goggles she's wearing in the moment, not to the things she's thinking about. So I tell her, your feelings are an absolutely reliable signal letting you know about the kind of goggles you're wearing. So Pam starts laughing at this. For some reason, this idea tickles her. And so I use that what I'm seeing in the moment. I say, so like right now, you're feeling amused, right? And she says, yeah. Okay, so I say, okay, that feeling of amusement lets you know you're perceiving the world with slightly amused goggles. She laughs some more. I say, okay, now that's because of what, not because of what I said. I could say that what I said to 10 people, one of them might get outraged and punch me in the nose, because they were wearing outrage goggles, or someone else might think that's stupid because they're wearing dismissive goggles. But you're feeling amused, that's because you're wearing amused goggles. Your VR goggles, the feelings are letting you know about the goggles you're wearing in the moment. Now, VR goggles is just a metaphor for the principle of thought and its power to create a perceptual reality for us, moment to moment. So I kind of repeat it, and I give her a bunch of examples. So, for instance, I ask her, I explain it to her. And then she checks, well, right, so I'm saying in any moment, what goggles are you wearing? That's what your feelings are telling you about. And she says, right now I'm saying, well, in any moment, your feelings, they're there to let you know what kind of goggles you're wearing. And then I give her an example. I say, look, right now in this moment, because I'd noticed at that moment that I was starting to feel more connected to Pam, as she laughed and fell out of her thinking and got a little lighter in her spirits, I started feeling more connected to her. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing. What I've noticed in general is that for all of us, the more we've got on our minds, the less connected we feel to ourselves, to other people, to life. And the less we've got on our minds, the more connected we feel. So as I start to feel connected to her, that's a signal to me that she's got less on her mind. It's also a signal to me that we're heading in the right direction. Because when I'm feeling deeply connected to someone, typically it means that both of us have very little on our minds. And that's a very insight-friendly space to hang out in. And that's the thing. I know that what Pam needs, the thing that's going to make a difference to her, is an insight, a realization about who she really is and where her experience is coming from. So that's my kind of objective in this session, is to get an understanding of what's going on for Pam, to find my way into that feeling of deep connection with her and help create the conditions for her to have the insights and realizations that are going to make a big difference to her in her life. Now, here's a really interesting thing. The insights and realizations are going to come from her. They're not going to come from me. Like, I may be talking and explaining and telling stories or whatever, asking questions. But that's just to facilitate the insights and realizations coming from her. Because what I know for sure is the moment you have a jump in your clarity of understanding, a jump in your realizations about who you really are, what you got going for you, your life's going to change. And this is what happened for Pam, and that's where I'm heading with this. So I'm not looking to do accountability or all those kind of things that they have in the coaching manuals. I really truly believe that thing of, people have all the resources they need. Like, I believe that. And so everything I'm doing is just helping create the conditions for her to have those insights. So in that moment, I start feeling more connected to Pam. So I point this out. I say, right now, in this moment, I'm feeling a little bit connected to you, like a little bit more connected than I was even 30 seconds ago. So I'm like, I'm wearing connection goggles. That feeling is letting me know about the thought-generated perceptual reality that I'm in. So I explain that to her. And I then give an example. I say, our feelings don't know about what's going on in the world. I gave the example of public speaking. Like, I used to be terrified of public speaking. But in this situation, here I am coaching someone in front of an audience of like 30 plus people in the room and 30 plus people on live stream, all the people on the Clarity Coach training program, and I'm feeling great. So the feelings are letting me know about the goggles I'm wearing. So I explain this to her, and she's nodding and so on. And so I do this bit of education, you could say. And when I use the word education, I'm talking about, the word education comes from the Latin educe, which means to lead out from within. So I'm looking, again, to the things I'm saying, the examples I'm giving, that sort of thing, are just helping create the context where something that's already there within Pam can step more fully into her conscious awareness. So when I finish my little bit, I say, now what are you hearing in what I'm saying, Pam? Because I see her nodding. I'm wanting to calibrate. Again, I'm wanting to find out where she is. I'm noticing where I am. I'm calibrating myself. I'm noticing that feeling of connection. I ask her, what are you hearing in what I'm saying, Pam? And she says, it's my choice what goggles I'm wearing. Now, I'm so glad I checked, because that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure that we do. Well, it doesn't look to me like we do choose. So I say that. I say, well, now let me go a little bit further. What did you hear about it's your choice what goggles you're wearing? So rather than telling her, no, that's not how it is, not how I see it, whatever, I say, what did you hear that gave you that idea? And she said, well, because the situation's the same, but it's just like what lens I'm choosing to look through. Now, here's the thing. This is a pretty classic personal development idea. You choose how you look at things and you decide what perspective. I just don't see any truth in it. So I go into that. I say that. I say, now here's what I'll say. This may sound dubious a bit at first. The reason I say that, I'm about to challenge what I'm guessing is a strongly held belief in the whole personal development-y, you choose your own reality type of thing that doesn't look real to me. So I kind of soften it a little bit. Now, by the way, I'm talking about all these things I'm doing, but while I'm doing them, I'm not thinking about it. This is me describing it after the fact. But while I'm doing it, I'm just in the moment. Just in the moment with my client, doing my best to understand them, doing my best to feel connected to them, doing my best to serve them, not really thinking about it. And that's a really important point. There are skills involved in being a high impact coach, okay? Being able to have really profound impact in people's lives. And it looks to me like the skill set it's not an explicit skill set. So an explicit skill set would be like, if you want to, learn to, use Microsoft Word, then here's a training course you can follow and you need to learn these 10 explicit skills. When it comes to coaching, clarity coaching, it's what I call an implicit skill set. The skills are developed implicitly. And so I'll give you an example for this. If you drive a car, if you're a good driver, then when you drive through something narrow like a fence, the gap in a fence in a farmer's, going into a farmer's field or into a parking lot where there's a narrow gap to get through, if you're a good driver, when you go through that narrow gap, you breathe in. And isn't that strange? Now, here's why you do that. The reason you breathe in when you go through a narrow gap is good drivers, when they get behind the wheel, they extend their body boundary to include the car. They literally, the sense of where your body ends and the world begins, if you're a good driver, you take that and you expand it to include the car temporarily. And then, because you've extended your body boundary to include the car, when you go through something narrow, you breathe in, because that's what you do if you're going through something narrow, out in the world outside of your car, you do that. So no one taught you to do that. But if you do that, that's an implicit skill, the extending your body boundary to the circumference of the car. That's an implicit skill that you developed given the conditions to develop it. I bet no one taught you to do it, but you learned to do it. It's a skill, and it's an implicit skill. Well, the Clarity Coach training program, I've designed it to develop the implicit skill set involved in having high impact on your clients, sharing the principles behind clarity with them. So as I go through describing what I'm doing, this is an after the fact description, but at the time I'm not even thinking about it. And that's what I want for you. That's why I share all this stuff. I want you to be able to get in a coaching session, be super present and connected to your client, and have your intuition guided by your clarity of understanding so that you can have a massive impact on them. So that's what I'm up to here. So anyway, I'm about to challenge this whole choosing thing. And so I soften it a little bit. I say, now here's what I'll say, and this may sound a little bit dubious, so feel free to take your time over it. I don't think you're choosing, and I don't think I'm choosing. And then I give a big example. I say, if we could choose, then we'd all choose to feel amazing all the time. But I don't think we are choosing. So I go on this rant for about a minute. And Pam says, makes sense. So I say, now what do you see that makes sense? I want to find out what she's seen, heard, whatever. She says that it's just my perception, not the reality. Now I hear her saying this, but I'm not really feeling the kind of that she's been super impacted. So I check again. She says, it's just my perception, not the reality. I say, yeah, now what do you mean by that? So again, I'm trying to find out what she means. She says, so it's actually being truthful with myself, because the truth of the matter is it isn't about that I need to do more work and do I deserve to have that time. So it's just my perception that it's not okay. So I say, I really like that. I really like that. I go, do you know that as you sit here right now? So I'm testing. So because she already said that there were things she knew intellectually, but she didn't really feel it. So she says this great stuff about it's just my perception, it's not the situation. So that sounds good on the face of it. So I go, do you know that? She goes, logically, yes, but, and I'm like, yeah, there we go. So I go, so we've got a different way of saying that here. I say, here's how we say that. I don't know that. And it's okay not to know that. So again, a lot of people, especially people who are very accomplished or very intelligent, they've learned that they need to know things. And if they know things, then it'll happen. And so this is where this whole, I know that intellectually comes from. So I tell her, hey, sometimes we don't know that. So I even invite her to do it. I go, can you just tell me, sometimes I don't know that I deserve time for myself? She goes, yeah, because I often feel like I don't deserve time for myself. And again, my thought, feeling, confusion alarm goes off again. And I go, I get that. But just because you sometimes feel you don't deserve it doesn't mean you don't deserve it. And then there's this long pause. And we start falling into a sense of connection. And we fall into that place of really deep connection. And then I start just explaining to her, like talking to her about who she really is. So I say, I can really feel you. And I explain that feeling of peace and connection, that's coming from who you really are. And who you really are is before time and work and all that stuff. And I explain, there's not enough work in the world that could improve who you really are. And there's nothing you could fail to do that could diminish who you really are. Because who you really are is already whole and perfect and complete. And so Pam's on, like, going along with that. But I get her to breathe as I'm talking about it. And I say, you could discover this. You could realize this for yourself. She stops breathing, so I get her to breathe. And the reason I'll often invite people to breathe, as I've noticed, is when people start to feel feelings that they've been trying to avoid feeling, sometimes unpleasant feelings, but sometimes lovely feelings as well. They kind of constrict it by holding their breath and tensing their muscles. And I notice this in my own body when I'm connected with a client. If I feel them tightening their muscles or whatever, I feel it. And so I just invite them to breathe. Because that process of tightening, constricting, whatever, is just them trying to stop the only thing that their body wants to do in that moment, which is just feel what they're feeling. So I explained to her, you could realize this for yourself. You have every reason to be hopeful, that there are lots of things in life that you didn't know and then you realized them. And so this is just another one of those. So I'm trying to make it like normal rather than, oh, you've got to have this big breakthrough. It's just a really normal thing. And then I check back in. I say, where are you at? Like just kind of checking in with Pam. So we've had this deep connection and been doing this deep work. I say, where are you at? And she says, well, what you're saying is making sense. And I'm just thinking about how I can absorb what you're saying and actually commit to it. Now, remember at the beginning, I said Pam's commitment thing, that might actually be something that's getting in her way. Well, I hear that here. She's now thinking, wow, this all feels great and makes sense and that sort of thing, but I need to commit to it. And I say, you know what? I'm going to take one more job off your list. You don't need to absorb it and you don't need to commit to it. I get that you're good at committing to things, but what I would love for you is for you to realize it for yourself and for it to just show up in the most natural and organic and Pam-friendly way in the world, in a way that you would realize it and it didn't require you to force yourself. And then I told her a story, and again, this is kind of the education piece. I talked about the difference between things that you commit to and things that emerge naturally and organically. Because remember, she was talking early on about I should do it, I need to do it. Well, that's all kind of the language of obligation and commitment and that sort of thing. And I just rather it comes from her naturally. And so I say that to her. I said, going forward, you don't need to absorb what I'm saying. You're going to realize it from within yourself. It's not going to come from me. It's going to come from in you. It's already there. And she says, yeah, I get that now. And I think she probably does, but I want to check. I want to calibrate. So I go, now what do you get? And she goes, that it's going to come from me. Because one of the big things earlier was about that. It's not about my work. So it's not about even serving others or whatever. It's about who I am first, and I deserve to be me. Now, I never said that to her, but she heard that from within herself. So I just kind of talk more about that, and then we pause, and she says, thank you. And then, as you may have heard, after the session and then the next day, when I just checked in with her, she said how light she was feeling and how she couldn't even remember what she's been feeling guilty about and all that stuff. And so that was great. And I'll often find that with demos, that it really has a big impact on people. But one of the really cool things with Pam is that it not only had an impact on the day and the next day, but when she showed up for her next coach training module, like 6 weeks later, she'd experienced some really big changes. And in fact, those changes continued for the next year. But so what you're going to hear next is the brief follow-up interview that I did with Pam at the following session. So the coaching session was in module 1 of Clarity Coach Training, the 2017-18 program. The follow-up session you're about to hear was in module 2, 6 or 7 weeks later. So here it is.
Thank you, Jamie.
Oh, you're very welcome. And, you know, all I did was, as I keep saying, my job is to help create the conditions where my client has the insights and realizations from within them. So while I appreciate the thanks, there's not enough good questions, interesting stories, and warm pats on the shoulder to give someone the insights that will make those changes. It's just not where it comes from. The insights and realizations that have made the difference for Pam showed up from within her. So what's been going on since that weekend?
So I've been going to the gym every morning at 6:30, and I remember I told you I felt guilty about going to the gym. What's really interesting, I actually can't remember what I told you I felt guilty about, because it's not in my head anymore. So I'm going to watch the recording just to see what my misunderstandings were, because I can't actually remember. I've shared it with quite a few people.
Well,
it's strange.
Well, we'll probably put the video up, because I think it'd be really interesting for people to see, and but what you just said, I can't remember what the misunderstandings were. That's the thing with misunderstanding. Once it clears up, it just looks different.
So I've got no idea what it was that was in my head before.
And so it sounds like you've been motivated to make changes and all that sort of stuff. Where does that come from? As you think about it, like if someone were to say, "Oh, Pam, how can I replicate your?" What would you say to them?
Just that I deserve to look after my health. Before it was like I didn't feel like I could have the time to go, but now I realise I deserve the time to look after myself. Put my own oxygen mask on first. But the biggest thing is not actually feeling guilty while I'm there. It's actually way more level of commitment when I'm at the gym, because I'm not preoccupied with other stuff on my mind of where I ought to be instead. So I feel like I'm in the right place at that moment when I'm there.
Beautiful.
So, and it's also had a positive impact in other areas as well, to do more of the things that I really enjoy doing. So, yeah, good.
Right on.
So keep watching less of me.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks for listening. This episode was brought to you by the Certified Clarity Coach Training Program. As I said at the top of the show, the program is going to be formally opening for registration in the next couple of weeks. So if you'd like to find out more about the program and find out what's involved in training as a clarity coach, go to jamiesmart.com/coach. That's jamiesmart.com/coach. Bye.